Hello and welcome to Take This TV, the television book club podcast where each week we watch an episode or two of our favorite show and we talk about it with our friends in the fandom. That's you. Hello. I'm Carmen Askerdes and I'm joined as always by my friend Kimberly Woods. Hello.
Hello, hot potatoes. Today we're on episode 7 of Constellation and it's called Through the Looking Glass.
Mm-hmm.
Lost and alone in the woods, Jo desperately tries to reunite with her daughter.
Yep.
Oh boy, this was a wild episode.
I feel lost and alone in the woods.
Me too. I'm in the liminal space right now trying to decide what's real and what's not and where I am.
Yeah. What did you think about Alice's adventure in this show?
Through the looking glass, as it were. I loved Alice's adventure. I loved the twins that play Alice. I thought, especially that scene where they're looking through the looking glass at each other and talking to each other was one of my favorite parts of the episode. Those young actresses are so good.
Yeah,
so
they did a great job.
Mm-hmm. It was a pretty emotional moment there, too.
Yeah, I was tearing up. It was great.
We have one of the Alices who I guess we are calling Dirty Alice, which is actually Jo's real Alice. Jo is her mama, asking Clean Alice if she can have her mama back. So it's a pretty emotional moment.
I wrote down in my notes, Dirty Alice asking Clean Alice if she can have her mom back is heartbreaking. I was like, that's so sad. Yeah.
What was your favorite part, Carmen?
Oh, I feel like so much stuff happened in this episode. The whole time we were just like trying to put everything together of like, wait, this means this, but the pictures mean this, and what. So I think I enjoyed like just the puzzle of it all. But if I had to pick a moment, I think the moment where Bud and Henry swap places. And then Bud's like, oh, it's so cold out here, I'm in my underwear. And then he just passes out and is just out TKO for the rest of the episode. It's hilarious. And so I don't think it's meant to be funny, but it was hilarious to us.
It was so funny. And also when he's holding Alice and he's like, who the fuck are you, kid?
Just throws her in the snow. Yeah.
But also we were trying to figure out, and comment if you know or have your theories, like why is it that Bud and Henry are able to switch spots right then and there? Is it the liminal space, like across the lake in this, like, you know, liminal cabin? Or is it the traumatic experience of Bud shooting Paul?
Yeah.
Or everything combined?
Don't know. We were theorizing that because Bud shot Paul, and because Henry had the cow and is also experiencing the trauma of the fire and all the things happening, it was like the perfect storm, which allowed them to switch places. Because before they were only able to like see each other or interact with each other when traumatic things were happening, when murder was afoot. But now it seems like it's elevated to the point where they could actually switch. So we'll see. And also, is Paul going to die? Like, like, how does Paul tie into the narrative? I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. So much stuff happened. We should kind of talk about the other stuff too. But like, yeah, so many questions, just like always.
Yes. Basically, the episode starts out where Dirty Alice is actually hearing Jo from the cabin, and we get the sense that Jo can hear Dirty Alice. She's looking for her, and then suddenly, you know, Dirty Alice comes out, and our Jo is like hearing these footsteps happening, you know, crunching through the snow, and so that kicks off this episode.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool because I feel like there are a lot of moments in this show and with what they're trying to do with the theme of this show where it's like things that you can relate to of like, oh man, I feel like I heard something in the dark or like I'm alone at home and I feel like I hear someone talking and it's nothing or whatever, it's just the wind. So I thought that was a cool moment with the sound design of like being able to hear the footsteps really subtly. Mm-hmm. But it definitely doesn't stay that way. So, but it was a great start.
Then we have Jo and Clean Alice back in their cabin. They're playing the tapes, and Clean Alice pulls out another tape, and it's the date after the accident. And we hear Paul talking about Jo's body being badly lacerated. So, yeah.
Yeah, these kids are hardcore. She's like, should we do another one, Mom, about this brutal murder in space? But we're like kind of hearing the incident that happened at the space station from when Paul survived. And we're seeing the events of the first few episodes from Clean Alice's perspective and just kind of like skipping around a bit around stuff we've already seen.
Meanwhile, Jo is getting a bad headache right near her eye, which, as we know, her eye gets sucked out into space.
Yep, like a gumdrop. It was pretty gross.
Let's see. We have some more quantum theory. We hear that's called quantum superposition. And again, it's where these things, it's like things can be in two places at once, which, you know.
Yes. Which we see a lot in this episode of like people getting into liminal space and hopping between universes. I mean, I don't even know if they're hopping between universes. That's just what we've been calling it, but who knows what's happening. So, yeah, the quantum superposition is definitely on full display in this episode, unlike we've seen it before in the rest of the show.
We have the pictures changing a lot, which, as Carmen knows, has been confusing me because I feel like I'm seeing like so many different versions. But, you know, again, it's going back and forth between an angel and a goblin. And then at one point during this episode, we get an angel who's kneeling, which is the first time we've seen that.
Yeah, so over the other episodes, they were really subtle about just like having those in the background, and sometimes they focus on it. But in this episode, they really wanted us to get it. So like, hey guys, here's these paintings on the wall. But so there's the one where we see an angel, and the angel is blindfolded and always kind of in a kneeling position. And then the other character or being that we see is like this changeling skeleton demon thing that's always with a pot. So we see them either being carried by these two people, or all of them are in the living room, and one of the beings is sort of in the center of the image. And so the one that we saw in this episode that we hadn't seen previously is the living room scene, or kitchen, or whatever the heck, with the angel. And so that probably has some kind of meaning. We were theorizing about it, but we don't know for sure. So
yeah, I mean, it kind of takes us back to the first episode called Wounded Angel. So it's like, okay, you know, at first we thought they were talking about Paul, but in another universe they could be talking about Jo because she's the one that dies.
I mean, so Paul is literally wounded in this episode, but Jo is emotionally wounded. I mean, the trauma that the Alices and Jo go through in this episode, the emotional trauma is pretty intense.
We get the scene that we've seen previously where Dirty Jo is up and stuck in the cupboard.
Dirty Alice.
I mean, Dirty Alice. It's too much. Dirty Alice is stuck in the cupboard, and Jo comes and rescues her. And this is the first instance of somebody crossing over through the liminal space into another world, right?
Yeah, so in the first time we saw Jo find Dirty Alice in the cupboard, we see her bring Alice back to the cabin where they're staying. She's running the bath or whatever, they run out of hot water. And then we see the moment where Clean Alice perceives Jo and Dirty Alice snaps back to her universe. And we can tell that she actually traveled between universes or from the liminal space or whatever, because she's in the bath with the warm water that her mom ran. But then once the switch happens, she's in an empty bathtub. And so it's like, oh man, what happened?
Yeah. And she's not wet.
She's not, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the first time we see that, see it happen before us.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's really cool. Then we get Jo asking Alice if she saw herself, and Alice is like, in the mirror? So I like that, setting up the later scene for in the mirror. Mm-hmm. They leave the cabin. We have this weird moment where, well, there's a confrontation a little bit, where Jo admits to Clean Alice that she does not think she's her mother, because all along Clean Alice has been saying, like, I don't think you're my mom. And so finally Jo is like admitting it out loud to her, and then Clean Alice takes off. She drops the cow experiment, charges forth, and the cow experiment is just left there because Jo also just runs after her.
Yeah, it's the start of like a series of unfortunate events, I guess you could say. And like we've seen Alice being really mature, but we're reminded in this scene that Alice is just a kid. And, you know, Jo, her mom telling her that, like, I'm not your mom or whatever, you know, it's pretty hardcore. So Alice runs off. But it is weird that Jo leaves the cow experiment in the snow. But I guess she was so focused on like trying to get Alice back that maybe she forgot about it. So at the moment in time, it's just like out there on the lake.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Dirty Alice has found the beads because while, Clean Alice and Joe were walking, Clean Alice was dropping the little string of beads on the snow. And so Dirty Alice finds them and thus finds her way to this other cabin, the liminal space. Right?
Yeah.
Alice too?
Yeah, because Dirty Alice is like, she gets brought back to the house by Magnus, her version of Magnus, who's like, oh, don't go scare me or whatever. Bad dad of the year, this version of Magnus. He goes back to sleep because he's like, clearly my young daughter is going to follow my instructions and stay in the house. And obviously she doesn't because she's a child. And so she runs back out looking for her mom. And that's when she finds the like Hansel and Gretel trail and follows it to this liminal cabin.
But meanwhile, I think it was incorrect. Clean Alice finds it first.
Yeah.
And she sees a dead cat when she gets there.
Yeah.
But when Dirty Alice gets there, she sees a living cat. And a dead cat? No, she sees a living cat.
Dirty Alice sees the living cat. Clean Alice sees the dead cat.
And Joe sees a dead and alive cat. Because there's a moment where somebody sees a cat. I think it's when Joe comes to that cabin. She sees a dead cat and an alive cat.
Because Joe's not able to get there until the house is on fire. The cabin's on fire. And then it feels like because the cabin is burning, it's thinning the veil between the liminal space and the real world. So it's like these two versions of it are kind of, all of these versions of it are overlapping. And so it's like a really thin layer. So Joe can actually get there and then the cats are alive and dead at the same time, just like Joe and everybody else. And Schrodinger is like on full display, I guess.
And Clean Alice is savvy, picks up the recorder, starts, goes into the little cupboard, starts playing it and recording herself and like trying to speak to her other counterpart on the other side.
Yes, the Alices are the smartest characters in this episode because they've kind of pieced together that like something's happening. Clean Alice knows that maybe there's another version of herself out there and tests it out by doing this. And Dirty Alice hears it in the cupboard. So she goes into the house. The recorder is there. Which I was like, we were talking about like how is the recorder making its way across the dimensions, and something we theorized is like because it's an object that is important to them or they're kind of attuned to, then it's able to sort of have the same abilities to travel across planes like they do. But
one thing I am confused by is why at that moment can Joe not hear her Alice? Like in the beginning of the episode, she hears faintly the footsteps, and she hears her kind of in the cabin calling. But then, when they're like both Alices are in the cabin in the little cupboard, she can't.
Oh, I think it's because I just had this thought, so this is half baked. But I feel like she has the cow in the beginning when she hears other Alice's footsteps, and I feel like the cow.
It's not in the shed.
Oh, because she does put it in the shed at some point. I mean, I guess
it's closer to her.
Yeah, I don't remember.
She does leave it in the snow.
Yeah.
So maybe because she left it at a distance, that's the problem.
Maybe because at one point, I think the cow like simulates the liminal space.
Yeah. Or strengthens, or like yeah.
Yeah, because we were also talking and trying to figure out like if the liminal space, if you don't need the cow to be in the liminal space, like what is the cow doing? But it seems like it's like creating the liminal space or amplifying the liminal space or whatever the process is that thins the veil. So,
yeah.
I
think that's why. I think you're right.
I think
because it's further away.
Yeah,
she dropped it.
She did in the snow. It's still in the snow.
But Henry lucked out with that.
Yeah, because Magnus calls the cops, and then we see like
which is hilarious. Magnus, what does he say during that thing? Let me see what
he's like. Alice, if you don't come back, I'm gonna have to call the police.
Yeah.
You better come out right now.
Oh yeah, he's like, she's going out to the lake. She's gone on the lake. Do you think it's safe? Like
the frozen lake.
Yeah, do you think it's safe? It's like, okay, Magnus. All right. Let's see. Anything else you want to touch upon here?
Oh, there was that moment in the car where Magnus, a version of Magnus, I don't know, other Magnus and Henry and the crew are all headed toward the lake house. the cabin, excuse me. And Magnus is asking Henry why he's here. And Henry lets Magnus know that this happened to him before. And that's the first time we hear Henry acknowledge this whole situation. Like, we've had clues and we've seen moments, but this is the first time he's verbalized it. Like, this is something he's experienced.
Yeah. And we kind of get confirmation as to what Bud was saying. Like, Henry was the one whose crew had actually died, and then whatever happened, and then they were alive.
Because they swapped.
Yeah.
And he also lets Magnus know that he called Irina, and he says that she's going to take care of Joe. Which, like, every time I hear somebody say they're going to take care of a person, I watch a lot of gangster movies. I'm like, they're going to murder her.
Yeah. It's very sinister.
Yeah,
like,
so
okay.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see. So Joe's back in the house. We have the sweet scene with her and her daughters, where she's speaking through Clean Alice, because she can't communicate directly. And basically Dirty Alice is asking her, like, when are you coming home? And she's saying, I don't know if I can come home, but that she's going to try.
Oh my gosh, the trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Clean Alice having to essentially translate for your not mom to your other self. Like, that kid's going to need some therapy.
It's horrible. And she does it to the point where she can no longer do it because there's smoke. And she's, like, getting... like, the smoke starts coming in and she can't breathe, and it's like, finally Joe realizes that she's in danger and, like, takes her out of the cupboard. But literally they're talking until that point.
Until she passes out.
Yeah. And Joe runs outside, hands her to the now Bud, previously Henry, who then we have that scene where he's like, who the fuck is this kid? And leaves her in the snow.
Yeah.
Towards the end of that episode, we have an interesting moment where Dirty Alice is basically beckoning her mom to come with her and saying that Clean Alice, who's lying on the ground, is dead. Like, she's a goner. Come with me. And it seems like, this is like a moment where she could have chosen to go back across, and she doesn't.
Yeah. Well, we see the veil is thinner than it's ever been. Both Alice's and Joe are all there at the same time. And we theorized that, like, because Clean Alice is between life and death, maybe that, like, is the reason they can all see each other. Who knows? But I love that Dirty Alice just, like, goes full, like, dark side or whatever it is. Like, she's dead, mother. She's weak. Come with me now. It's pretty hilarious. Just, like, looking at yourself, a version of yourself dying and being like, leave her behind.
Yeah.
This kid's hardcore, but...
And once again, it feels like one of those Schrodinger moments where it's like we have Dirty Alice seeing Clean Alice is dead, but Joe seeing the potential in Alice still, and that's why she's not dead. So she chooses to stay. We start seeing Alice breathing again, finally, and the, rescue team comes and gets her. And
they take Joe away.
They take her away to the hospital, where we get this creepy, creepy scene.
Oh, yeah. Oh, but before that, so Dirty Alice runs to Magnus because Joe is like, go to your father or whatever. And she's like, oh, I saw Mom. Did you see her? And just like, he's going all in for the gold to be worst dad of the year. And he's kind of like, no.
Well, he says, I don't know.
Oh, yeah,
so
I
he
don't
doesn't
know.
completely shut the door, but he did hear her. This is the first time this Magnus has actually, like, heard her or sensed the other side.
Oh, because he saw them, right?
Yeah, he hears, he's like, Joe?
Yeah.
So that's the first time we've seen an instance of that. So he doesn't shut it down completely.
Thank
goodness. Because it's like, wait, if you're saying that, the cat's dead, is it going to be dead? So he doesn't say no, he didn't see her, but he says, I don't know. So he leaves it open, so maybe there's a potential there. But we feel like one door has kind of shut for our Joe, and she has to find another way again later if she's going to make it back. And can she even make it back? Because on the other side, she's dead, so...
Who knows?
What's she going to go back into?
Who knows? But like you were saying, in the hospital, when Clean Alice is recovering, we have a scene where... at first I was like, is this a dream? Because we see her sort of like unconscious and recovering, and then we see her walking about the hospital. And so I was like, well, because she's unconscious, does that mean she's in the liminal space? Which raises more questions of, like, every time you go to sleep, are you in the liminal space? Is that like the dream space? let's not overcomplicate it and overthink it, I guess. So, Clean Alice is having this dream, and then she hears a voice, and like the lights are flickering. And my first thought was like, it's the devil. Here comes the devil. But no, it's the cosmonaut. It's Irina, the dead version of her that Clean Alice told Joe previously that she sees sometimes. Mm-hmm. And she's beckoning her, telling her that her mom's not far away and she can take her to her mom. With me. Yeah, it's creepy. It's
very creepy. It turned full-on horror movie at that point. The kind of flickering darkness.
Right? What does that mean?
I don't know. I want to hear all of your theories, though. Because we only have one more episode to wrap this show up.
Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I don't even know.
I don't know. So join us next time. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. We're at Take This TV on Instagram and TikTok. Tell us what you thought. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. And remember, it's dangerous to watch TV alone.